I'd say we all have to acknowledge certain directors in the horror genre as undisputedly great. You can rank them however you like, but there's really no argument to be made against Wes, George, John, and Toby, leaving indelible marks on the genre we all love. So much so, in fact, that I didn't even have to use their last names for you to know exactly who I'm referring to. While Carpenter is my favorite, and I believe his run of quality is better than any of the others listed, Craven has more all-time classics, you might say. I'd say Craven has more stinkers too, but I think that it's the disparity that makes stuff like today's film fall under the radar. While Deadly Friend isn't as good as The Serpent and the Rainbow, The People Under the Stairs, or Red Eye, it's certainly better than stuff like Swamp Thing, Deadly Blessing, or The Hills Have Eyes 2. Dog flashbacks be damned. So in the spirit of the holiday, whether you're with family this turkey day, or maybe a Friendsgiving, let's just hope it's not a deadly Friendsgiving, let's take a look back at a movie that ended up being drastically different than it was originally conceived and revisit Deadly Friend.
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
Coming off the made-for-TV movie Chiller in 1985 after the full year of 1984, Wes Craven and writer Bruce Joel Rubin were drawn to a novel that was released by Diana Henstell titled Friend. It followed the love story between preteens and how far one would go to save or bring back the person they loved. The book heavily focuses on the sci-fi aspect of the main kid's robot BB and the transformation into Sam, with the horror being focused on the adults around them and showing how terrifying everyday people could be. The first script, and even most of what was shot originally, was designed this way, but Warner Brothers soon found out what Craven did the previous year and wanted a more blood-soaked horror movie to capitalize. They did the reshoots and released it in October to push that spooky feeling. The movie ended up being a critical and commercial failure when it was released on October 10th, 1986, with a haul of under $9 million on an $11 million budget. Ouch. Not for lack of trying or talent, though. Craven doesn't need to be dissected here, but writer Bruce Joel Rubin has had a very interesting career. He's actually an Oscar winner for his original screenplay for 1990's runaway success Ghost, with Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, and fellow Oscar winner Whoopi Goldberg. His other 12 credits include a random collection of stuff like Deep Impact, Stuart Little 2, and a personal favorite, Jacob's Ladder. The cast is a fun collection too. Samantha is played by Kristy Swanson, who had a hell of a debut feature film year in 1986. While she was the star of this, mostly, she also appeared in Pretty in Pink and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Matthew Laborteaux would make his last on-screen appearance before moving exclusively to voice work, but he was a huge cast member of Little House on the Prairie before this. The rest of the cast is filled out with character actors Anne Ramsey from The Goonies, Richard Marcus from Tremors, and Roger Rabbit himself, or the Zodiac Killer, Richard Fleischer as the voice of BB. The movie itself follows a typical 80s pattern with bullies, fun robots, good parents and bad, childhood friendships and loves, and of course, since it's a horror movie, copious amounts of gore. These gore scenes were mostly added in, and they even had to be trimmed down to get an R rating. And the team of Craven and Rubin were trying to get it PG or PG-13 in the first place. That just wasn't to be, and while a more introspective horror flick with Craven's deft hand could have been great, the extra gore is one of my favorite aspects, and it's quite ludicrous here. The basketball death, you know the one, is so fun and over the top that it can be watched on loop without context and enjoyed for its pure schlock. The other scenes they added are just as memorable, but the last one especially is often derided. We'll get to that one. The few gripes I have with the movie start with BB and his noises. The thing was expensive to make, and it was a Frankenstein's monster of various parts to put together, and it could even lift, I think I read, up to 700 pounds. It would be done better a year later with Johnny Five and Short Circuit, and as much as I love Charles Fleischer, it's really annoying here. I respect the work that was put into it, and it's certainly unique, but it's hard to listen to and ranges from distracting to outright bad. Once BB is destroyed by a shotgun-wielding, stereotypical angry neighbor named Elvira and put into Samantha's body, it's a lot better. It gives Kristy Swanson a chance to stretch her legs, and something I never noticed before this viewing was the way she holds her hands are mimicking the hands of the BB robot. She is menacing when she has to be, but also pulls sympathy from the audience. That's what makes the ending my other pain point for the movie. The whole time, Samantha is a mixed bag of murderous robot and scorned girl. It's a well-played scenario where you aren't sure if she's killing the bad adults because the robot side of her protecting Paul, or from these adults hurting her human body and soul before the death.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
The true ending of the movie should have been when Samantha is killed just after getting back some of her humanity, when one of the cops mistakenly shoots her when he thinks she's gonna kill someone. It tells the moral of not messing with things that God or science can't fix yet, and ends on a somber note, but the bad adults were also punished for their crimes. What we get instead was an add-on ending that the very head of Warner Brothers asked for. Paul sneaks back into the morgue to start the process over again, and Samantha rips the skin of her face off, revealing an altered version of Bibi underneath. It chokes Paul and eventually breaks his neck after the screen shifts. If this had been, as my buddy Mike Bracken, the horror geek, says, football practice, and Paul woke up, I'd be okay with it. Where it ends almost turns it into an EC comic or Tales from the Crypt episode. Does it look cool? Yeah. Is it dumb as hell? Also yes, and even though I normally love that, it just falls flat here. The stuff that works thankfully outweighs my gripes. I think poor Samantha's situation with her father is heartbreaking, and I feel for Paul loving her and his mom wanting to help rather than the typical ignoring attitude. The dream sequence, and Craven knows a thing or two about dream sequences, is delightfully unhinged, and another fun insert on the same page as the ones mentioned above, to just add gore. When Samantha kisses Paul and then goes home to get killed by her father, it actually gives the dream sequence a deep sense of dread and sadness that you wouldn't expect from a mid-80s horror movie. Normally I want a horror movie to get to the actual horror, but I like the character building that Deadly Friend does, and even the time it spends ramping up after Samantha's brought back adds a little something. Okay, I mentioned it's based on a book, and since I'm our adaptation guy, of course I bought the book so you don't have to. I know the Arrow himself, John Fallon, is a big fan of both, and it's different enough that it deserves a read. Some of the main differences are the kids being much younger, Bibi is destroyed by Samantha's dad instead of Elvira, Elvira dies by drowning in a tub rather than basketball-induced head explosion, and an ending that is much more fitting to both this kind of love story and is less tacked on and nihilistic. The book ending is still cynical, sure, but it's also up in the air to let you decide what happens. There are quite a few more differences, but those are just a taste. The movie wasn't complete when it was originally released on video. It did make it to DVD eventually, where it was restored to its original gore, though. That disc would also come in a pack with Carpenter's Someone's Watching Me and De Palma's The Hand. There was also Eyes of a Stranger, but I genuinely have no memory of that movie. This movie also got a solo release on Blu-ray from Scream Factory with some special features and one heck of a cool cover. While Craven and Rubin were ultimately disappointed, Swanson looks back on it with pride now. The original Vampire Slayer actress had a really hard time at first with both the material and the crew, but Craven ended up pushing her in the right way and she came out better for it. Wes was one of a kind and made this movie during one of the best and worst times of his life. On the one hand, he had released 2 movies the previous year, including a franchise-starting all-timer in Nightmare on Elm Street, and on the other hand, he was going through a nasty divorce and faced a possible $30 million lawsuit alleging his most famous story wasn't even his. The movie should be a lot more of a mess than it is knowing that. Deadly Friend probably isn't going to top anyone's, top of the list for either 80s horror or movies by Craven. That being said, it's better than you remember, and as long as you enjoy it in the right mindset, it's a fun movie to watch with some friends or catch on TV. It's a revisit worth bringing a dead friend back to life for.
Seems like the world is moving on. Didn't stop to look around. Didn't give a shit if you're crashing down. You can close your eyes but not your skin. Don't believe what you refuse to see. Won't find a way in. Well, I can't ignore a certain